Hey guys, how you doing? This is Caleb, and I'm here to show you something that I wanted to do for a long time. Back in 2023, I did a military uniform inspired by the Napoleonic Wars. The jacket was pretty cheap since I just recycled it from a video I did a long time ago, back when I was just a weird teenager that has since been delisted, and modified it with some blue fabric from an old shopping bag, but I wore black pants and shoes, white gloves, a white ruffled jabot collar, and a plumed shako that I made by taking another boat captain's hat and sticking some big red ostrich feathers into it. I started wearing it in my reviews and some other videos, beginning with the Norm of the North 2 review, and it became my avatar ever since, especially for Halloween. Then in 2024, not only was the jacket really cheaply done, but it was also getting too tight on me, so I made another one also out of a white dress shirt, and it looks more professionally made since most of the material that I had came from a fabric store, and I had just about the right materials for it, and I also got a pair of white pants appropriate for this uniform. It was then that I was planning to do another professional sewing project that was tied to my uniform, and that was the hat. I wanted to make and wear a shako that looked more authentic, one that was fancier, and one that would fit my character even more. And since I like to draw some of my military officer characters, especially in fan art of other characters, with shakos that are a cross between a shako and a bearskin cap with lots of fur around the base, as well as a large amount of plumage with a thick towering hackle surrounded by lots of ostrich feathers in different colors, inspired by a Napoleonic drum major's Kolbak busby worn in the marches of Entre Sambre Moose in Belgium, held every year from May to October. This is the kind of direction I went for this. And so, here it is. My new shako. This is the official military shako of the fictional country of Plumeria in my animated universe, especially since I put that on one of my characters, Sylvia, who is a cannon girl in the Plumerian army, but my plumes are red and blue while hers is yellow. But onto the subject itself, today I'm going to show you how I made this fancy new shako, which was made on a budget, but not too overly cheap, and how it's going to define me going forward. And maybe you could make something like this too, since there aren't that many videos showing how to make an authentic looking Napoleonic shako on the internet. I mostly followed along with a tutorial that I found on TikTok and also did my own thing. However, I will explain some mistakes I made along the way that I hope you can avoid making, and explain some better solutions to avoid those mistakes in case you want to make one yourself. In my case, I was able to try and overcome those mistakes in the end with some fixes. But without further ado, let's begin. So let's start off with the tools and materials you're gonna need to make it. Like I said, I made this big beast on a good budget, so being from Canada, most of the materials I got came from Fabricland and Dollarama, and sometimes Party City and Amazon. It might have come to like around the $100 range, but I saved up quite the budget for it over the months. So for the tools I used, this cutting mat is essential for your sewing and craft projects, including this, but you'll also need some safety scissors, some pliers, a cutting knife such as an X-Acto knife, in my case I used the knife part of my Swiss Army knife, a tailor's awl for poking holes, a good glue such as a glue gun with sticks, a school glue stick, speed cell glue, and super glue, some gold acrylic paint with a brush, a measuring tape for sewing, some pins to keep your materials in place as you sew, a permanent marker, a pencil with a sharpener and eraser, plus a ballpoint pen, some white thread with a needle, some wooden craft sticks to spread with, some duct tape to seal the bottom of your plume hackle, and some clear packaging tape. And you could also use a stapler with staples inside. For the materials, you'll need a feather boa or two in the colors of your choice, like if you wanted to make a hackle in half one color and then half another, but I chose one red feather boa from Party City. Just make sure any loose feathers are shredded before it's ready to use. Then you'll also need some bendable wire, some big long ostrich feathers in the colors of your choice. I chose red and blue and went for the 14-inch length. And a long graduation cord with tassels in the color of your choice. I picked blue. Some big gold shank buttons without holes on top. Some white cardstock paper, in my case I used some leftover sheets of white poster board. Some long pieces of gold ribbon and gold webbing for a plume holder. Some black leather and other fabric needed for the brim, but my brim was recycled from an old hat like the one in my really old video. Some felt sheets in black and whatever other colors you like, but I personally used royal blue, red, and yellow. An empty toilet paper roll tube for the base of the plume holder. A small buckle with a latch and some gold leather trim for a chin strap. Some paper clips. Some faux fur, such as these two white throw rugs I found from the dollar store. A big sheet of cardboard for the base. And a black sheet of poster board. Now to put everything together. Let's start off with the plume hackle. First, cut 42 inches or a little longer of wire with pliers, and then bend it halfway, but try and mark the half point first. Then, after a little over 3 inches, bend that point with both ends going in an opposite direction and twist the point one time. Then, if your feather boas have a loop on both ends, stick one end through one of the ends with the wire, and twist the wire again to keep the end of the boa in place. Keep twisting until you reach the half point from when you first twisted the wire. Then wrap the boa around the twisted area until you get to the last bit of twisted wire. Afterwards, wrap the boa around one end of the wire and go in a figure 8 style until you reach the end. When you reach the end of the boa, put that end through one of the ends of the wire depending on where the wrapping stops. If you have another feather boa, even one that's a different color, you can wrap that one around too if you don't have enough feathers to cover an entire hackle that's thick enough for your liking. Then twist the wire a bit more to close up the hackle. Cut the ends with the pliers after about 1 to 1.5 inches from the last twisting point, and bend both ends down so you don't accidentally scrape yourself on the top. Next, seal the bottom of the hackle underneath the feathers by wrapping some duct tape around it and cutting off that piece from the roll with some scissors. This is what it should look like. I personally did this after I built the hat itself, but it's not a big deal. Next, let's build the hat itself. First, cut a long strip of cardboard and measure the length you want it based on the diameter around your forehead, and make sure the ridge marks, which are the lines across the cardboard, are facing vertically as you want to cut horizontally. You want it to be a couple centimeters longer than your head's diameter. If it's too short, cut an extra piece off and add it with some tape. If it's too long, cut off a small part of the end. My head diameter was a bit over 62 centimeters, but the strip I cut wasn't long enough even though it was that exact length, so I brought it up to 64.5 centimeters by cutting and adding an extra piece. Then slice between the ridge marks with a knife so it can bend more easily. If the base is too tall, cut off a fraction of the height with scissors, probably about a quarter. It should look like this. Next, get the black poster board, place the corner of the cardboard strip at the corner of the poster board, and trace lines around the cardboard with a pencil to get the adequate measurements. Then cut that piece off with scissors. Now glue the poster board strip onto the side of the cardboard and let it dry. Once it's dried up, you can bend it. Now cut up a fluffy white throw rug or other kind of faux fur and make sure it's sizable enough to go to the top of the cardboard or over it. Then hand sew it on with the sheet pinned down, removing each pin as you approach them. If your faux fur isn't big enough to cover the entire strip, have one sheet go halfway and have another sheet cover the other half with the same dimensions measured using a permanent marker on the back of the fur sheet. My first sheet went a little bit over the half mark, so I made the second one smaller while making sure it fit. You may need a break from your hand and the needle after you've sewed it on. I certainly needed one because it wore out my fingers. Next, let's poke some holes in the sides for the hooks where our cord is going to hang. Measure where you're going to poke the holes. The holes should be placed 1.5 centimeters below the fur and 16 centimeters away from both ends of the base strip, left and right. Mark the spots with the pencil, and now we're going to use the awl to poke the holes all the way through the fur. This is what it should look like. Now we're going to make the top of the hat. Cut up another piece of cardboard into a square that's a bit bigger than your head and create a circle. You want the circle to be at least 19.5 centimeters in length and width, and the circle should be accurately round. The way I did this was to take one of my cardboard drum containers, specifically one that would fit my head, and trace a circle around it on the cardboard square. Then we cut the circle across the outline. Next, we're going to cover the circle with our felts. But first, let me talk about designs. I've seen some cool designs on the tops of Napoleonic bearskin caps and some other types of military headgear worn during the period, and since my Shako is a cross with one of those, I decided to put a design on the top myself. You can have your own regalia design associated with royalty or the Napoleonic Empire, etc. But since my fictional country of Plumeria is run under a good kind of monarchy, I picked a gold crown with a red crest and a gold ornament on top that looks like 3 small feathers. This is why I'm using royal blue felt for the background and yellow and red felt sheets for the crown. I drew the design on paper first, with symmetry, and then cut out the design around the outline. Before we put the design on, we need to cover the circle with our background felt, in which I used the royal blue, and we need to cut some flaps so it's easier to stick onto the circle. Next, use a glue gun to glue the flaps onto the circle. Now it's time to glue the emblem onto the background on the other side using speed cell glue. Make sure you don't accidentally squirt too much like I just did or it'll go everywhere, but you can clean it up. Now spread the glue across the emblem with a craft stick and stick it onto the covered area. And a quick bit of caution that the speed cell glue may have an unpleasant smell when it's not dry, which is why I wore a nose clip doing this. It should look something like this, and if you want to insert your plume more easily, you want to cut a little notch that's the width of the latch on your hackle, with the emblem facing upward to the notch. Mine was wider, but I made it tighter by using my glue gun on the sides while not closing the area too much. Next, we're going to cut a black pad that we can glue below the top, with tabs that we can glue onto the inside of the base. Draw another circle on your black poster board, keeping it away from the edges, about a couple inches apart. Draw a square with gaps that are also 2 inches apart from the circle, then draw some rectangles on each side of the circle in the middle of the 2-inch spaces. Then cut the circle out with the rectangle tabs. And glue the circle to the bottom of the top part where the blue flaps are with your glue gun. And then bend the rectangle tabs. If the tabs are too long, you can cut a quarter off of them with scissors. Now let's do the gold badge plate. You can have it any shape and design you want, even if it is one of the official Napoleonic ones, but I went for a shield with the Plumerian coat of arms. First, draw the shape you want on a piece of white cardstock or poster board using symmetry, and fold it in half for that symmetrical look, then cut out your shape. Next, give the shape a few coats of gold paint until there are very few bits of white left, letting it dry after each layer has been added. Afterwards, draw the design you want on there with a thin permanent marker, like a coat of arms for example. Next, trace around the shape you just cut out onto a piece of cardboard, and then cut out that shape in the cardboard along the outline and paint one side of it gold. Now we're going to want to be able to pin this into the front of our Shako, so we want to use a paper clip. First, unbend the paper clip into a straight line. Then, we want to leave a small square space in the middle at about 1.9 centimeters and bend both ends, making sure they're in a parallel position across the gap. Then place both ends in the center of the badge plate horizontally, and mark your points with a pencil, and use the awl to poke some holes. Then we can put the ends through the holes, making sure they stick through the back of the cardboard that's painted gold, then bend it slightly to be in line with the surface of the base, and use our school glue stick on the back of the front layer, and I mean the white space, not the space that we painted gold and drew our design on, so it can be glued onto the surface of the cardboard piece where we stuck our pin through. And make sure the shapes are aligned with each other. I also made sure to paint gold on the edges afterwards so it could fill up the ridges a bit. And here it is. Next, we need to poke the holes into the base of the Shako for the pin on the badge to be inserted into. Make sure the positioning of the holes is slightly above the center, use the measuring tape, and divide the length of the base by 2. Then determine the positioning of your pinholes where the half point of the measured length should be between the ends of the pin. Once you mark the points you want with a pencil, poke through the marked points with the awl, and insert the badge plate right side up slightly above the center. When inserting, please keep in mind about how the fur affects the visibility of the holes. To solve this problem, put 2 needles through both holes from the inside, even if it's another paper clip bent into the same shape as the pin. Align the pin with the needles as if the points are touching each other, and then carefully slide the pin through, and when it comes through, you can bend and twist the ends of the pin to lock it in place. Now we can prepare the top to be glued to the base. First, have the front of the base facing down and position the edge of the top upside down with the plume socket facing down, then choose either the tab to the left or the tab to the right of the plume socket to glue on, because right now we only want one tab glued on. We don't want all of them glued on until the ends of the base are close together, otherwise they won't stay glued on for long. Glue that tab to the inside area of the base like so. Next, before we close the base up, we need to make some hooks to hold the cord. Using the pliers, straighten and cut up 2 additional pieces of wire at least 4 to 5 inches each, then bend halfway at a 90-degree angle, and bend a U-curve at the end until the pointy end is in line with the other end. Do the same thing you did with the badge plate pin. Line up the wires carefully with a needle like the awl, and slide them through the holes you poked with the pointy end of the U-curves pointing up. Then use the pliers to bend the other end down to keep them secure. Now we can close the base up by sewing multiple loops across both ends from top to bottom. And tape up all the thread afterwards to keep it secured. Then we can make sure the top is lined up correctly and glue the other folded tabs to the base. Next, let's cover up the threads we just sewed to close the base up using black felt. Use the scissors to cut up a strip of black felt that's long enough to go between the top and the bottom and wide enough to cover the tape. Spread the speed sew glue across with a wooden craft stick and glue it on. Then we want to close up the edges on the left, back, and right between the tabs underneath the top with a glue gun. This is what it should look like right now. Now we can attach the brim to the edge on the front. Like I said before, you could cut a big crescent-like shape into some leather, cardboard, and another fabric and layer them on top of one another, but I personally recycled my brim from an old hat from a really old video I did back in my teens. So all I needed to do was trace the inside of my brim between the two fabrics on a piece of cardboard, draw some tabs to cut in between so I could attach them onto the edge more easily, cut it out, slid between the ridges with a knife so I could bend it, make sure everything was a solid color, and use the glue gun to stick the top side bending upward to the leather after sliding it in, and then put more glue on the bottom side bending downwards and stuck it to the other layer of fabric and bent the tabs upward. Keep in mind that you will need to cut an extra bit bigger on the cardboard for the tabs. It should look like this. Now we'll position the brim onto the edge on the front of the base with both of them upside down, and all the elements on the front and the brim should be facing the same way. Take the speed sew glue and use a craft stick to spread it onto the bent tabs above the brim, not behind, then position it correctly and glue it to the edge on the front inside the base. Next, let's cover the bottom edge with some black leather. Cut a thick long strip of it with some scissors, or two of the same thickness if your strip isn't long enough. Then spread some speed sew glue across and carefully glue it on the bottom edge, making sure it aligns to the edge and covering up the thread and the brim tabs. Once the glue is all dry, the hat should look like this all around. But we're not done yet. There's also the chin strap we want to do. That way the hat can stay secure on your head, especially if the plumes are adding more weight. First, we're going to take a long strip of gold leather trim at about 90 centimeters to a meter, then we'll fold it in half with the lines on the back facing each other, then fold it in half again, and cut into quarter strips with the scissors. Take the first quarter, making sure that the top layer is right side up and the bottom layer is upside down, and mark and poke 12 holes across the middle, all spaced out by squares, with the first one at the end spaced away from the end by 2 squares. Make sure the strips are kept aligned and straightened out. Then use some glue to stick both of them together and cut the corners at the end near the first hole. Next, we can take our other strip, which was folded in half the first time, take our permanent marker, and mark a line a few squares from one end and cut it off. Then we can cut the piece we just cut off along the middle line and create a belt loop later. But first, we need to poke a hole through the half point with the awl, put this trim through a small buckle up to the half that we folded, and the buckle prong should come through the hole. Now we can do our belt loop using the small pieces of trim we cut. If your pieces aren't long enough, you can do what I just did and use a glue gun to put a couple small spots of glue on each end to stick them onto one another. Then we can glue the leather strip together up to the buckle and let the glue dry, and you could use a staple near the buckle if you need to. I personally did, and the strap was still comfortable on my chin.
20 minutes later.
Now we can try fitting our first end through the buckle. If it's too big to fit through, you can use your scissors to cut some really thin pieces off the sides and then try again. After we've fitted it through, we can make sure our holes are big enough for the buckle prong to get into once more with the awl, and of course the prong itself, and when successful, we can take our belt loop, slide it through one end of our strip where the buckle is on the other end, and use the glue gun to squirt a small line of glue from side to side on the back near the buckle, and stick the loop on. It should be stuck there for a long time, and then we can do a test buckle of both strips, with the end of the strip with holes going through the loop. Once that's done, we can pin some big gold buttons through the back ends. We will need to unbend a couple small paper clips and straighten them out, slide them through the shanks on the back, and then bend them in half to create the pins. Then we can use the awl to poke a couple holes through both back ends where we want our pins to go through, 2 holes per back end. And if the ends of the pins are aligned correctly with the holes, we can slide them through. If you're using shank buttons with an emblem or coat of arms, make sure the buttons are right side up before putting them through. Now we can take our hat base and poke a couple holes near the edge on both sides of the brim, 2 holes per side. Then with a couple pointy items put through the holes from inside the hat and the ends of the pins on your buttons carefully touching the pointy ends of those items, slide it through the outside and twist the pins so they stay pinned on. The buckle strip should be on the left side of the hat, and the strip with holes should be on the other side. Next, we can hang our cord onto our hat. First, we'll have both ends with tassels touching each other, mark the half point with our finger, hang the half point on one of the hangers on the left side where the buckle strip is, then, making sure that the cord is bending downward on the front and back of the hat, we can hang the ends over the hanger on the other side where the hole strip is. Then we can carefully tie a big knot around the hanger and have the tassels dangling over one shoulder. This is what the final base of the hat should look like. And now finally, the pièce de résistance of this project, we can attach our plumes. Now, the plumes are optional. You can go without a plume if you want, and if you want lots of plumage, you can surround the plume you just made with some big ostrich feathers in the colors of your choice. But before we do that, we need to make our plume holder first. Take an empty toilet paper roll tube and cut a straight line across one side of it with scissors. Then mark the width close to the same width as your ribbon and webbing. Draw a straight line across and cut that piece off. Cut another piece off of the same size and glue them together on top of one another. Roll up the base you just cut, make sure the width of the space is about the size of your thumb, then flatten the base and spread some speed soak glue on the inside of it, then apply the gold ribbon and make sure that first end of the ribbon is about 1 centimeter over the first end of the base. Then use the glue gun to apply some glue onto the 1 centimeter of that end of the ribbon and apply it to the other side of the base, and then squirt some more across the other side of the base and apply more ribbon. Once it's all applied and flat, you can cut the unglued ribbon off. Next, we can apply some gold webbing on the outside, using a glue gun to apply some glue onto the webbing and then applying the webbing onto the outside. If the base is too long, you can cut some length off, but not too much, once again making sure that the space in the hole is about the size of one of your fingers. Once you've determined the size of your space inside the plume holder, you can glue the ends onto one another with the glue gun. Your plume holder should look something like this. Also, before we attach the plumes, we have to make sure that they stay secure in the Shako without the stems wiggling around or falling out. You can either use a paper clip bent in half and tightly secured in the middle with hot glue, or measure the plume stem's width on a small piece of poster board or fabric with the plume inserted, then wrap the material around the stem and use some glue to apply both ends and then stick it on with a strong glue. But for right now, I just bent a straightened paper clip in half and tried to keep it stable with some hot glue. Then I inserted my thick plume that I made with the wire and the feather boa, and locked it in place by bending both ends of the paper clip over the wires on the stem like so. Now with that done, our plumes can be attached. First, we'll put the bottom of our tall plume we made through the plume holder. If you want even more plumage, you can surround it with some big ostrich feathers in your colors of choice, and if your plume holder is just the right size inside, the ostrich feathers can be inserted with ease. And you'll want to make sure that enough feathers are inserted around your hackle so it's snug and tight and you don't have to lose any of them. I personally chose a pattern of red and blue, one by one, because those are some of the colors that will be adopted by the country of Plumeria and its army. And there you have it, the finished Bearskin military Shako. I'm really pleased with how this one turned out, and the floofy bearskin fur and fluffy colorful plumes really add elegance to a military or marching band outfit, let alone one inspired by the Napoleonic era. I love how the plumes bounce as I march to the fife and drum music and the quaking cannons, as well as how they flow around in the breeze like big hair, especially when the cannons are firing around me. When I wear this Shako, you may refer to me as Captain Toonland, commander of the Plumerian Artillery Brigades. I also occasionally participate in infantry drills, and still wear my other Shako when I want to be a musician in the Plumerian marching band, playing a proud marching song on my drum as I go off to battle or participate in a parade. Whatever I may do, I will fight for my country and defend my kingdom from any army that tries to declare war on it, with all the man and woman soldiers we have. Now, on a final note, I think this new Shako is going to be great for cosplaying, role-playing, Halloween, and maybe even parades and pretend reenactments. And as for the name of Captain Toonland, that's the name of my rebranded identity and alter ego that's going to be appearing in future videos when I'm in uniform. This means that starting with my upcoming review of Wallace and Gromit Vengeance Most Foul, my series Caleb Reviews will be rebranded as Captain Toonland Reviews going forward to embrace my new identity. Plus, Captain Toonland will also be a character in my dream animated universe, along with the rest of the Plumerian army when I eventually get into the realm of independent animation. And that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching through the video, and if you decide you want to make a Shako like this, you can always go back to this one anytime. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to my channel for more awesome stuff that I'm cooking up. And if you would like to support my work financially and get tons of rewards, such as watching my videos 1 to 2 days early, then you can become a member of my regiment at patreon.com/CalebDirksen. So on that note, thank you guys again for watching, and until next time, take excellent care of yourselves and have a good one. This is Caleb, over and out.